This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
I'm a real optimistic person. I remember in the depths of the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, I would go on CNBC and I was just super optimistic. And CNBC was almost disgusted with me that I was so optimistic. That's how optimistic I was, because everyone else was saying capitalism is dead. And after 9/11 was really, I lived about 3 blocks from the World Trade Center. I had breakfast at the World Trade Center that morning. And of course, it was very horrible for many, many people there, much more horrible than anything I experienced. But at the same time, out of that, even though it just seemed like the worst thing in the world, there were still reasons for hope. Like America had come together. And you don't forget, we were in the middle of a bear market then. It was the dot-com bust. And now there was this terrorism on U.S. soil. There were a lot of reasons to be depressed. And in fact, the market itself didn't recover for another almost year and a half after 9/11. And I lost my home during this point because I didn't yet know anything about investing or trading and just made a lot of bad decisions. But I still had hope that when the dust settled, things would get better. And I was very excited about my own opportunities. And right now, we're in a situation where it's pretty scary because I don't know what it is. Like right now, we're in more wars than ever. And they're all proxy wars. It's not like, oh, the U.S. declares war on so-and-so, and so now we're at war. Like, as much as I hate the war against Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, the U.S. was fighting for something. But right now, these are all proxy wars. So, U.S. involvement in Ukraine and Israel versus Hamas and Hezbollah, this is all about, obviously Russia and China are fueling Iran, who is providing support and weapons and money to Hamas and Hezbollah. For the past several decades, the U.S. and the rest of the world has been giving aid to Hamas and Hezbollah instead of building a magnificent country like everybody had hoped they would do. They built weapons and tunnels and so on. And, right now, this is the 1-year anniversary of October 7th, where Hamas brutally raped and killed many civilians, children, older people. I once said this to somebody on my Facebook feed, a guy I know who has a PhD in whatever and real smart guy. And he was like, oh, you must be just reading fake news. And I'm like, no, they posted videos. Like I actually saw the videos that they posted and everybody acknowledged that they posted these. Hamas acknowledged that they posted these. They posted these on the parents of the victims' Facebook pages. Like it was really horrible. And yes, obviously nobody wants children dead. I mean, that's a whole other topic. But what I really want to talk about is, again, what causes these situations? We're entering into World War III. And I don't say this lightly. Like I think people say this lightly. Oh, we're in World War III, and then the dust clears and there's no more news. But it's very odd what's happening. If you follow the news, Israel's not only fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, but also now there's obviously missiles back and forth from Iran to Israel. China and Russia are funding Iran. The U.S. kind of lightened sanctions on Iran and released a whole bunch of money, which Iran said they wouldn't use on weapons. And for some reason, we believe them. And this is those times when you start to say, regardless of your political affiliation, Republican or Democrat, don't do bad things. Don't do things that are going to lead to a war. Where, by the way, it's not just the U.S. that hates Iran. It's every other country in the Middle East, with the exception of Qatar, hates Iran. And Qatar doesn't hate Iran because Qatar, depends on Iran for all the oil money. They ship out the oil the same way Iran does, and they're kind of beholden to Iran. But if you look at what's happening now, Israel's fighting the Houthis in Yemen also, which are another group of terrorists, and the rest of the Middle East is helping Israel. So there's kind of new alliances happening. Like when Iran sent a bunch of ballistic missiles to Israel, Jordan actually engaged with those missiles and stopped some of them from landing in Israel. And I'm hearing this from my own connections and contacts throughout the Middle East, that The rest of the Middle East wants Israel to not wipe out the people, but wipe out the terrorists who are disrupting the oil supply in the Straits of Hormuz. These terrorists, that's the Houthis, but the Hamas and Hezbollah, there's a reason why no other country in the Middle East wants these terrorists inside. It's not all about like, hey, we're all Muslim, so let's band together. No, Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and other Iranian-funded groups are terrorists. So when they go into other countries, they cause problems and they try to take over those countries and they try to disrupt those countries. The other countries don't want that. They want to move beyond the age of oil and create, technologies and innovations the way Israel does, the way the U.S. does. They want alliances with Israel. Don't forget, the original reason why Iran wanted Hamas to do what they did on last year on October 7th was because Israel was about to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. That would totally be devastating to Iran. So they did what they're doing. Now, the only problem with any kind of war or an invasion of Iran is that 98% of Iran is secular. They hate their leadership and they're pro-US and pro-Israel, by the way. And so it's a very interesting situation that's happening, one that could either end very badly. We need strong leadership. I am not saying that's Biden, and I'm not saying that's Trump, but you have to look at presidencies in the past where leadership wasn't strong and in a foreign policy sense. Like, for instance, I think Jimmy Carter is probably one of the smartest and kindest people to have ever been president of the United States. But he was a weak president from a foreign policy perspective. Like Brezhnev and the Soviet Union walked all over him. And then ultimately Iran took hostages and just wouldn't release them. Guess what? They released them on day one that Reagan became president. Does that make Reagan a great president? No, but it makes him perhaps a strong president in the eyes of the world. Like right now, the presidency is in flux. We know that the reason Biden stepped down from the Democratic nomination, not everybody, but a lot of people thought he was like sharp and still had his wits about him, but apparently he didn't. This is not me saying, this is not opinion. All the Democrats said this, and they appointed a new nominee. And so we know then, and his own party, his own administration admits this, is that he is not a strong president. And right now that leaves the world exposed a little bit because the U.S. is the police of the world. Now, what happens also is you see all these protests at these colleges and all these woke protests, and I'm saying woke disdainfully, actually, because we know it's a fringe, just like we don't like the fringe right. Okay, you all have seen the threads on Twitter from these fringes, whether it's right or left. They're horrible. As I get older, I find I want the status quo plus improvement. And what I mean by improvement is technological innovations improvement. The stuff you've heard on this podcast about AI melded with healthcare, melded with genomics, melded with, better and better robotics and technology and so on. This is going to change the world, not 10 years from now, but literally tomorrow, it's going to change the world. And if we're bogged down in wars, though, wars do not help the economy. Let me just break that myth right here. Wars are horrible for the economy. The reason why World War II was good for the economy is we had been in a depression for 10 years. From 1929 to 1939, the U.S. was in the Great Depression. Almost anything that hired people would have gotten us out of the depression at that point. This is the longest downturn in U.S. history. And it didn't have to be that long, but we can go policy by policy to see which ones were good, which ones were bad. But Vietnam is a great example where the Vietnam War actually hurt the U.S. economy. The U.S. got into so much debt that we didn't have enough money to pay for the war. And so Richard Nixon took an unprecedented action. Previously, before 1971, the US dollar was backed by gold. You could turn in a dollar and potentially get a dollar's worth of gold for it. The dollar was an IOU. In fact, the invention of paper money, it's interesting. The invention of paper money was when people would take their gold to the goldsmith to store it and in the village, And the goldsmith would issue an IOU, like IOU to James. Oh, he gave me $10 worth of gold. And then people would use those IOUs as paper money to buy things. And that evolved into the paper money that was backed by gold until 1971. We just didn't have enough gold and we needed more money to pay for the war. So Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. Of course, every country followed. And that's when the real money printing machine took place, which led to a decade worth of horrible, horrible inflation. And so war is not good for the economy. There's a saying, two countries either trade bullets or dollars. And you much prefer them trading with each other and trading dollars because that means the world economy, i.e. capitalism. By the way, I don't even like using the word capitalism. Most people don't realize this. The word capitalism is not a capitalist word. The word capitalism was written in the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx, and it basically means people who accumulate capital essentially at the expense of others. What I think the kind of economy that we actually live in is what I will call innovationism, an innovationist economy. The US and the rest of the world does well when we invent things, and we don't do well when we don't invent things. And when you're bogged down in war, the only things you invent are things that help in wars. And I'm hoping we don't get sucked into that. Whoever becomes president next has a real, almost sacred responsibility to not get us bogged down in more wars. Now, I have seen firsthand pretty recently how much money is made by middlemen like ammo dealers, I forget what you call them, but they make enormous amounts of money when there's a war. Oh, if you could be in the middle when Ukraine or Russia or Iran or Israel is buying all these missiles, you're going to make a lot of money. And these people have a lot of influence in the US. This is not conspiracy theory. We all know this to be true. Anyway, this is a long intro. I had a casual conversation with my friend Brandon Webb. You might remember Brandon. He runs softrep.com and military content group. He's a former Navy SEAL. He happens to know a lot. He knows a lot of people in intelligence agencies all over the world. He happens to know a lot about war. He's fought in wars. He has many people working for him who report on the wars that are happening now. And so we just had a casual conversation. Fortunately, Jay was recording it, and Brandon makes up some interesting points about what's going on overseas. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me on Twitter, and I will find the right resources to answer them. And also, tomorrow, I am super excited about my guests that are coming on, Nate Silver and Maria Konnikova. Maria Konnikova, you might remember, she's been on this podcast many times, starting from scratch. She learned the rules of poker and quickly became so good that she became a professional poker player. She wrote a book about it called The Biggest Bluff. And Nate Silver, you might know, he is the expert in the United States on elections. We talk about elections and poker and what it means to live a life of making rational decisions based on the probabilities. So that's tomorrow. But today, right now, Brandon Webb. Here we go. Here's our little podcast about, are we really at risk of entering a World War III?
You know, speaking of like all what's going on around the world, what's your take or what's your company's take on, are we in World War III?
Yeah, I wrote an article about it this week. Essentially, we're in World War III. It's like, this is the way the new world war is fought. Like, it's in the shadows. It's through proxies.
Where's your article? Is it on SoftRep?
Yeah, it's on SoftRep. And then I wrote another one yesterday because two of my sources confirm that Russia is contemplating arming Iran with nuclear weapons just to make it a major player in the region, which would totally change the game with Israel. I think it probably, given the way Israel is being run by Netanyahu, probably puts them in like a first strike. Like, they would probably, if they confirm the intel, they're going to strike. So
you think they'll strike? Well, I kind of expect anyway, Israel is going to bomb Iran's nuclear facilities and just take them out. But is that enough to stop them from, I mean, there's probably nuclear, I mean, I assume why haven't they hit Iran's nuclear facilities before?
Well, I think they're focused on, mitigating this. They basically stomped out Hamas and Gaza, and now they shifted focus to Hezbollah and Lebanon. And what's fucked up is they're using the U.S. They're using the U.S. and the fact that we don't really have anyone at the wheel of the ship, right? Like Biden's just kind of lame duck, and he's checked out anyway. So one of our sources, I haven't wrote this one up yet. I'm trying to piece it together a little bit more, but I heard that Hezbollah wanted to negotiate a ceasefire, and Israel used the American CIA asset, like a CIA guy, to basically say, look, this is what it would look like. Like, we're kind of like pitching this deal. So get together. And so all the Hezbollah leadership and the local handlers from Iran got together. And then that's when Israel just they just use that. They use the Americans to basically pass this intel on to get Hezbollah to meet with all the kind of like senior regional leaders to meet in one place. And then they just bomb the shit out of them in Israel and just kind of played.
So they said, yeah, we'll do a deal. Why don't you guys, here's the terms, you guys figure it out. So that got everybody, the CIA asset then said, let's all get together and figure this out. And then, yeah, man, that's genius.
I know. Well, this was like right after they did the pager and the walkie-talkie explosive, and that was all.
And they've got to be scared of Israel.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I think Iran should be scared. But again, it's just like, the problem is it's not Iran by itself, right? It's Iran backed by China and Russia. And that's a problem.
But now, like, with Israel taking out the Houthis also, which is even further than Iran.
They bombed a Russian base in Syria that was a weapons storage for Hezbollah. So they're not messing around, man. Like Netanyahu is like kind of unchained. In America, no one's doing anything. And to be honest, I had a lunch with my Lebanese friend yesterday who was like worked with the UN and like high level contacts, and another Iranian guy there at the table. And basically he said that Trump is much better for this global conflict that's happening than Kamala. He's like, I can't stand Trump. He's like the rhetoric and this, but he's like, I would take all that in spite because I know that he's better for global stability, because Kamala is just like business as usual, right? And that really hasn't worked out very well for America the last 50 years. And Trump is not beholden to any party. He's not beholden to the super hardcore conservative Christian groups. He's not beholden to the hardcore Israel lobby groups. He's kind of that's why they fucking hate him, and he freaks people out, because he's not even, he's totally reshaped the whole Republican Party. So, but I do think he's a tougher negotiator, and people they know he's not bluffing, right? He assassinated that Iranian
Soleimani,
yeah.
And so from what I hear too, the Arab countries are all supporting Israel, like, because they all hate Iran, except for Qatar. The whole GCC hates Iran, and Qatar, their wealth depends on Iran, so they can't hate Iran. But they are rooting for Israel to just destroy Iran's leadership and take out the Houthis and do everything they're doing.
Yeah, I know. But again, back to the problem, it's not Iran by itself. It's backed by Russia and China, and Putin's loving this because it just takes all the visibility away from Ukraine, right? It's like great for him.
Right.
And that's a whole nother like human catastrophe, right? America lost, I think, 56,000 lives in Vietnam. In Iraq, Afghanistan, and the other conflicts in the last 20 years, we lost maybe, I think, less than 30,000 lives. You're talking almost 1 million lives each side, Russia and Ukraine, just in this conflict. Like, it is a massive body count, man, that will completely reshape the demographic. Yeah, they already had a pretty good male to female ratio, or, it was like definitely like 2 more women than to every man in Russia. And now it's even more. I'm going to move to Moscow and get a wife.
I know.
For this.
Your next stop is Kiev. Why would Putin risk arming Iran? Like, he knows that's going to start World War III.
Well, I don't know. I mean, why did he invade Ukraine? Because
why they invade Israel, actually, knowing that Israel would retaliate? Maybe they thought public opinion would be such that Israel would be able to retaliate.
Well, I think, I mean, I watched a lot of interviews. I think Hamas didn't expect that the fighters would go totally unchained and rape women and like kill civilians. I think they thought they were just going to like attack military targets. And the sheer extent of like, because I also thought it was a huge mistake for Israel not to release that footage. Like if they had really shown the brutality of like raping, killing pregnant women, raping a ton of women at that festival, and just like all the brutality was just not exposed because it was so visceral. But I think, and that's something on the flip side, Hamas does a very good job of exploiting any civilian casualties. But Israel should have released everything and said, look, this is like a massive atrocity. And that's why the reaction was so brutal. They're just like, this isn't, I mean, I would say, I'm guessing, but 90% of the casualties were civilian, not military. They're just killing innocent civilians. And then you add to the dynamic that Netanyahu is kind of being pushed out, and now he's like got a way to stay in power. It's like the old Roman emperor playbook. You want to be in power, go win a war. So I don't know. And so Israel, I don't think Hamas, I think they bit off more than they could chew is what I'm trying to say. That's the short version. And then they're like, oh shit. You know, you end up with this situation where it's just like a perfect storm, right? It's like perfect geopolitical storm where you have like a weak sitting president, well, Biden in his prime. You have this perfect political storm where a sitting U.S. president who's now a lame duck, but also like not all there with his mental faculty. Yeah, which is one of the reasons why it emboldened Putin to invade Ukraine in the first place. And then
it's so funny, by the way, on that, I just want to say, I have friends who are liberal Democrats who insist that having a weak Biden is not why Russia invaded Ukraine. Like they just insist. And I'm like, yes, they wanted to invade Ukraine, but you really think if Trump was there, they would have invaded Ukraine? They wouldn't have. Yeah. There's no way.
Yeah, no way. So that's the situation. And everyone's kind of now taking advantage, right? Netanyahu's doing whatever he wants. And that you can read between the lines in the New York Times, like he's frustrating the U.S. Secretary of Defense and everybody because he's just like kind of double talk, and then he just goes and bombs whoever he wants. So, but I think obviously Iran has always been a major regional like proxy supporter of Hezbollah Hamas, and even back to funding Osama bin Laden, and so now it's just like this perfect storm that you have all the components for potentially what I would say we're already in World War III. I write that in an article. We just don't. It's just like this is the way the war is fought today when you have a global supply chain and all these, interests. Because China is like very good at just kind of playing the game of Go, right? They're just like quiet, sitting back. And they run their own problems, but
I mean, you think China will invade Taiwan before Biden gives up?
My personal theory is they've kind of already have control of Taiwan from probably like a covert intelligence perspective. They already kind of like have their claws in Taiwan, so they really don't need to take it over, but they could, and the U.S. would do nothing right now. That's the reality. They could do it tomorrow. What does the U.S. do? Nothing. It would be a talking point in the election is all it would be. And it probably even help Trump more if they did that. Because I generally, it's back to my conversation yesterday with my friend from Lebanon. He's like, I don't like Trump. He's like, I think he's an asshole. But for like global security, I think he's better. Like, because he's the one thing that Trump is that I like about him is that he's recognized that we've made kind of a mess the last 20 years with these wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, overthrowing Gaddafi in Libya, just like messing around and causing problems in the world. He's like, enough is enough. And he's not in the pocket of any lobby group like the most politicians, right? They owe favors. That's just the way it works. Even when my first startup was getting a racetrack approved in California, we had to show up and donate to the Board of Supervisors campaign fund and throw a party and make people donate less than $200 in a little envelope because they don't have to disclose the donation if it's under a certain amount. And you have this political favor to leverage to play. And we played it. I played that game at a very local level, but that's how it works.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I really hope
he's better for global security.
You look like Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. Like, this is like the Legion of Superheroes or something. Like, why do people think Kamala, who's really just seems so fake, but people tell me, oh, Trump's going to dismantle democracy. And I'm like, well, why hasn't he already done it? He was president for 4 years. He could have easily done it.
That's the talking point and look, there's plenty. I mean, he just talks and says whatever the hell he wants. And if someone followed you and I around with a tape recorder, we'd be in trouble,
Definitely I would be.
Yeah, same with me. And he just doesn't care. He doesn't have carefully crafted talking points. He says whatever the hell comes out of his mouth, and they take it as they take it literally, and he doesn't mean it literally. Like, if you just look at the facts, he doesn't mean it literally. And guess what? Elon exposed a ton of media bias on X. Like, the Democrats were pulling the strings, like, hey, pull this down, pull the Hunter laptop, suppress this. Even the New York Times suppressed that Biden laptop story. So, it's just an interesting interview I watched was the Pavel Durov, the Telegram founder.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson interviewed him. It was a good interview. Tucker Carlson gets some good interviews, especially the Putin one was super revealing. But
yeah,
Pavel was like, I thought I would come to America and be free. And actually the NSA and FBI were trying to get a backdoor into Telegram. Then when I wouldn't give him one and we had to move to Dubai, the NSA went after one of his senior engineers to try and bribe him with cash to give him a backdoor into Telegram.
That's so crazy. Like, and is he going to get out of jail?
I think so. I think there's some weird dynamic where they're using him to kind of like talk to Putin, I think. And I have talk about my crazy expat friends. I have a Russian friend here, and he was saying this at a poker game we were playing. He's like, I think that Pavel generally wants to get back in the good graces because he just wants to be able to travel to see his family and friends in Russia, and he really can't now. So it's like, if he does, he's like this middleman negotiator and put back in Russia's good graces, Putin's good graces, he can go back home. He can not have to like hide out in the United Arab Emirates. So,
yeah.
But it's crazy, man.
I hope Israel just takes out Iran. And if Iran falls, I think we're in a new, like how we were in the 90s after post-Cold War. Like, it was just this great time. And
yeah, for the Middle East, it would just blow open, right?
But if Israel could take out Khomeini, I think, the Iranian people would love that.
Yeah.
Nobody else in the Middle East supports Iran.
Yeah. Yeah, you saw the civilian population almost did it. They almost did it, but they just cracked down hard.
They're just not strong enough for civilians. Like, Iran's got too much experience, squashing them.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting times.
Well, I think Trump's going to win, but just barely. And then I think there's going to be chaos. I think the Democrats are going to dismantle democracy and try to prevent him from taking office.
Yeah, they've already kind of done that in a sense with the legal system, right? Like, they've weaponized the legal system for politically. Yeah. Like, now that cat's out of the bag.
And they want to get rid of the Supreme Court. Like, it's crazy how fascist the Democratic Party is here, and they don't realize it. And they accuse Trump of being fascist.
No, I think that what people need to realize is like our political system is broken, and that we need to fix that. And historically, the only way that gets fixed, because the people in power have no incentive to fix it, it's some type of revolution, violent or nonviolent. You saw it with the transition of like the monarchies in Europe and Eastern Europe. They either made a deal with the people that rose up, or they got their heads cut off.
Yeah.
And that in our country is really we are not as free as other places in the world. Like, it's just like when I published the Benghazi book on SoftRep, we had like full insider sourcing, and I remember I was in San Francisco picking up my airplane, and I got a call at around 11 p.m. from a friend that used to work in the CIA, and he was warning me, don't publish this. Like, you're going to be in trouble. Don't publish. Like, putting pressure on me not to, and that just made me want to do it more, because it exposed this whole, it really wasn't even like a Hillary Clinton thing. It was more of this Patrick Kennedy at the State Department. He's this career bureaucrat that hid evidence, hid this laptop of Ambassador Stevens for a month before turning it over to the FBI. Just manipulated all this process for his own self-interest and as well as Hillary Clinton's in the midst of the second term Obama election. And I was just like, you're threatening me, like, with just publishing a book? Like, I was blown away. But once you really like look at America, and that's one of the reasons I like that Powell interview that he did on Tucker Carlson, because he talks about this. He's like, I thought me and my brother would come to America and come to San Francisco, and we're going to be free and do whatever we want. And in reality, he's like, it was very similar to Russia. All the government agencies coming, making demands, telling us to like do this and do that, or we're going to be in trouble. So he just left. He went to UAE.
You can't imagine. I mean, it used to be that there would never be any consequences for starting a company. Now you could like go to jail for life.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
Right? Yeah, it really is.
And that is fascism. Like, when the government doesn't own the businesses but controls the businesses, that's the definition of fascism. So, and that's what, and the Republicans don't do that. Like, I don't think they've ever done that. Like, but the Democrats are like doing that all over the place.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then once you kind of like point the ship in that direction, it's hard to change course. And and again, it's like everyone complains like, how is Biden or Trump Kamala the best America has to offer? It's just like that's what our broken system produces, like bad choices.
I can't wait till Vivek Ramaswamy runs for president again. Like, he's made the public know, the public knows who he is now. He's like a really smart guy. I think he would be good.
Yeah.
I like Tulsi Gabbard too.
Yeah. Yes. I thought Trump should have picked
Nikki Haley.
Yeah. I think she's smart. I don't agree with everything she says.
But it would have been a unified ticket though then. Like, they probably would have dominated.
She was supposed to give us an exclusive for SoftRep, but I wrote an article about Netanyahu taking a play out of Hitler's playbook, and she was like, refused. She refused to go. They had agreed and everything, because I wrote this article. She's like, no, you're like not like just blindly supporting Israel, and I'm not coming on your show.
Oh my God. That's too bad. That would have been a good interview.
Yeah.
But all right, sir. Well, look, let's keep in touch. I'll play chess anytime you want.
All right, buddy.